Have you ever stopped to think about why the loudest people are the ones most heard? Why ignorance disguised as confidence gets more attention than true wisdom? We live in an age where opinion became knowledge, where influence replaced reason, and where questioning became an act of rebellion. Today, our generation doesn't just accept ignorance, it worships it. It turns it into a spectacle. And the most frightening part? Most people don't even realize this is happening. In this video, we'll explore how we reach this point through the philosophy of Socrates, the man who chose death over accepting lies. But first, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments. Do you think our generation still seeks truth? Or have we traded wisdom for cheap entertainment? Because what you'll discover here might shake your certainties about what it means to be intelligent today. Socrates lived over 2,000 years ago. But if he were alive today, he would immediately recognize what we're living through. A civilization that confuses noise with knowledge, that trades depth for popularity. He walked through the streets of Athens doing one thing, asking questions. Questions that made people uncomfortable, that pulled them out of their comfort. He exposed the illusion of those who believed they knew everything, when in reality, they knew nothing. And that's exactly why they condemned him to death. Not for being dangerous, but for making people think. Today, we're living through something even more concerning. We don't just sleep intellectually, we celebrate that sleep. We've turned ignorance into entertainment, into memes, into trends, into identity. Look around. Who are the idols of our generation? They're not thinkers, they're not those who seek knowledge or truth. They're influencers who thrive on attention, performers who distract, provocateurs who live off controversy. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with entertainment. The problem is when it completely replaces reflection, when we spend more time consuming ready-made opinions than forming our own, when the validation of likes becomes more important than self-knowledge. Socrates warned about this. He said the greatest danger isn't ignorance itself, but the illusion of knowledge. When you think you know, you stop questioning. And when you stop questioning, you stop learning. Think about it. When was the last time you heard someone say, "I don't know"? In Socrates' time, admitting ignorance was a sign of wisdom. It was the first step to learning. Today, that's seen as weakness, as incompetence. We're taught to have opinions about everything, to speak loudly even when we understand nothing. We confuse confidence with knowledge, assertiveness with truth. And so we build a society that values who appears, not who thinks. The more visible you are, the more important you must be, even if you have nothing relevant to say. Socrates faced the sophists. They were the influencers of his time. They used rhetoric and manipulation to appear intelligent, charged high prices to teach persuasion, not truth. Their goal wasn't to enlighten anyone, it was to gain power and influence. Sound familiar? Because the sophists have been reborn. They're on social media, in politics, in culture. They're the ones who know how to say what people want to hear, who feed egos instead of minds. And the crowd applauds because it's comfortable, because it confirms what we already believe. Truth makes us uncomfortable. Comfortable lies attract us. But here's the deeper problem. Socrates believed ignorance could be cured through dialogue, through honest questions, through deep reflection. But what happens when people no longer want to be cured? When they prefer distraction over consciousness? Noise over silence? Our generation doesn't lack information. We're drowning in it. We have access to more knowledge than any previous civilization. And yet, we understand less and less about ourselves, about the world, about what really matters. Because knowledge without wisdom is just noise. Data without reflection is just distraction. The more we consume, the less we digest. The more we know superficially, the less we understand deeply. Socrates said, "I know that I know nothing." It wasn't false modesty. It was radical honesty. It was recognizing that wisdom begins when you accept your own ignorance. But that sounds alien today. In a world obsessed with certainties, with quick answers, with instant solutions. Imagine if our leaders had that humility. If content creators had it. If we ourselves had it. How would it be different? How much more honest, more open, more wise would we be? But instead, we're trapped in a race for attention, for validation, for likes. And whoever controls attention controls the mind. This isn't conspiracy. It's basic psychology. It's how our brain works. We're attracted to what's exciting, controversial, immediate, not to what's true or deep. And modern culture knows this, exploits it. Socrates believed a society only thrives when it seeks truth above comfort, when it values virtue more than pleasure, reason more than emotion. But what do we see today? The complete opposite. Our heroes don't question. They distract. They don't make us think. They make us feel. And feeling is easier, faster, more addictive. We scroll endlessly. A tragedy here, a comedy there, an absurdity over there. Everything mixed together, everything competing for our attention. And in the middle of this flood, critical thinking drowns. It's not that intelligence has disappeared. It's that it's been suffocated by noise. Attention has become the new god. And unlike wisdom, attention doesn't care about truth. It just wants to be fed, constantly, without stopping. Socrates would ask us today, are you thinking or just reacting? Because what we call thinking is often just echo, repetition of other people's opinions. We consume ideas like fast food, quick, emotional, without digestion. But just as the body doesn't thrive on bad food, the mind doesn't thrive on empty content. Imagine Socrates today, walking through the digital marketplace, through the endless feeds of social media, asking his uncomfortable questions. What is justice? What is virtue? What is a good life? How many would stop to listen? How many would simply scroll past, looking for the next distraction? Plato, his disciple, recorded something powerful. Socrates believed democracy only survives if citizens are educated, if they have reason and virtue. Without this, people elect those who say what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. We're living exactly that scenario. Our discourse has become theater. Truth competes with popularity and loses. The problem isn't technology. It's the psychology behind it. Each click, each share, each like reinforces our emotional impulses, not our reason. We're conditioned to seek validation, not understanding. And that's how the worship of ignorance begins. Not as a conscious choice, but as gradual surrender. When you stop questioning, you start following blindly. When you follow without thinking, you start worshipping. It could be an ideology, an influencer, a narrative. Doesn't matter. The mechanism is the same. Socrates would call this moral decay. The moment when society forgets its purpose. It's not to be entertained, it's to become wise. But this decay hides behind progress. We have smarter machines, faster communication, and yet we're lonelier, more anxious, more divided. How can a society that knows so much understand so little about itself? We value those who express opinions, but rarely those who seek understanding. We reward those who appear certain, even when they're wrong. We mock those who admit doubt, even when they're wise. Socrates would have been cancelled today, not for corrupting youth, but for asking uncomfortable questions. He said, an unexamined life is not worth living. But the modern world is built to prevent that examination, to keep us busy, distracted, entertained. Constant entertainment has become the new philosophy, pleasure the new truth. The Greeks had a word for this, hubris, arrogance, the illusion that we know more than wisdom itself. And history shows that all hubris ends the same way, with collapse. But is there hope? Can a civilization addicted to noise rediscover silence? The silence where thought, reflection, self-knowledge are born? Carl Jung said, people will do anything to avoid confronting their own soul. Our culture is proof of this. We fill every empty moment with content. Because silence feels threatening, we'd rather drown in distraction than dive into introspection. But Jung, like Socrates, believed healing begins with awareness, with the courage to face yourself without illusions. What makes Socrates timeless isn't his answers. It's his questions. He didn't pretend to know the truth. He knew that asking the right questions was more powerful. Imagine how our society would change if we valued humility over ego, reflection over reaction. If deep thinking were more admired than loud noise, Socrates would remind us that each person still has power to resist the tide. Wisdom doesn't begin in institutions. It begins in the individual choice to seek truth instead of comfort. You can't change the entire culture, but you can change your relationship with it. You can choose to listen more carefully, think more critically, speak less, and understand more. That's how revolutions of consciousness begin, silently, from within. Every time you question instead of reacting, you light a flame. Every time you choose reflection over outrage, silence over noise, truth over convenience, you resist. You become, in a way, a modern disciple of Socrates. Remember, he never wanted followers, he wanted thinkers. People capable of facing truth even when it hurts, because truth doesn't enslave, it liberates. Socrates believed ignorance isn't lack of knowledge, it's moral blindness, a refusal to see. And this blindness isn't accidental. It's cultivated, designed, maintained by forces that understand how to manipulate us. Throughout history, those seeking power learned one lesson. It's easier to rule the distracted than the wise. In ancient Athens, sophists used rhetoric to confuse logic, turn debate into theater. Today, the same spirit dominates media, politics, and culture. We sell attention, not ideas, and whoever controls what you see controls what you think. Socrates saw this danger long before algorithms existed. He saw how the human mind could easily be flattered into obedience. People prefer the comfort of pleasant lies to the discomfort of hard truths. When you study Socrates' dialogues, you notice something profound. He never told people what to believe. He just asked questions until illusions collapsed under their own weight. That was his weapon, not anger, not ideology, reason. Today, that kind of questioning is an act of rebellion. In a world that rewards certainty, whoever questions becomes a heretic. That's how the cycle continues. Powerful narratives capture attention, keep people entertained, outraged, or divided, everything but conscious. The masses, attracted by emotion and novelty, feed the system that deceives them. What happened in the Athenian agora now happens in the endless scroll of our screens. We confuse noise with knowledge, trends with truth, emotion with enlightenment. Nietzsche said, "Madness in individuals is rare, but in groups it's the rule." This collective madness is what Socrates saw emerging when people stopped thinking for themselves. When the crowd becomes judge of truth, wisdom dies silently. It's replaced by consensus, convenience, and comfort. Think about how easily we're persuaded today. By slogans, headlines, viral outrage, few stop to ask, is this true? Is it right? Who benefits from my belief? Socrates would love these questions. He believed the path to wisdom begins with doubt. Not cynical doubt, but honest investigation. Truth isn't found in agreement, but in examination. But here's the dark secret. The system doesn't want thinkers. It wants consumers. Thinking people are hard to control. They question authority, challenge assumptions, seek meaning beyond the material. That's why the cult of ignorance serves the powerful so well. When people are busy competing for attention, they're too distracted to notice their own manipulation. The Socratic method was the antidote. He engaged in dialogue not to win, but to awaken. Each question revealed a layer of illusion. Imagine if that spirit returned to our conversations, schools, politics, a culture where disagreement isn't a threat, but a path to understanding. Instead, we're trapped in echo chambers, surrounded only by those who agree with us. Comfort replaced curiosity, but perhaps the most tragic part is that we confuse freedom with choice. We believe we're free because we can choose between brands, opinions, ideologies. But Socrates would ask, if you don't control your own mind, are you truly free? Freedom, he taught, begins within, in the domain of thought and desire. Without that inner freedom, external freedom means nothing. In one of his dialogues, Socrates compares the soul to a charioteer guiding two horses, one noble and disciplined, the other wild and untamable. The charioteer is reason, the horses, our desires. If reason loses control, the soul is dragged into chaos. This metaphor perfectly describes our society. Our technology, our impulses, our appetites have become wild horses. We're dragged by speed, pleasure, immediacy. But the charioteer sleeps. Erich Fromm warned that modern humans risk becoming automatons, beings who appear free, but are inwardly empty, following orders disguised as desires. The illusion of choice replaces the search for truth, and this illusion, more than any other, is what Socrates sought to destroy. So the question everyone must face, are we living or just reacting? Are we shaping our minds or letting them be shaped? Because the moment we stop questioning, we start worshipping. Whoever we worship, an influencer, an ideology, a false narrative, becomes our new god. And when that happens, we lose ourselves. Socrates taught that the greatest victory isn't over others, but over yourself. He understood that society's decline begins when individuals lose the courage to think independently. What we call the information age is, paradoxically, an age of dependence. Dependence on validation, on opinions, on authority. We're surrounded by noise but starving for truth. And Socrates' deepest message is this: wisdom doesn't disappear from the world. It disappears from within us when we stop seeking it. When we stop respecting the inner voice of reason, the worship of the ignorant begins. When we outsource our thinking to trends, headlines, popular figures who promise certainty in exchange for surrender. Socrates refused to surrender his mind. Even before the Athenian court, accused of corrupting youth, he refused to beg for mercy. He said, "I would rather die having spoken this way than speak yours and live." In that moment, he showed that integrity of thought is worth more than life itself. His death wasn't tragedy. It was a message, a warning for all future civilizations. When a society kills its philosophers and celebrates its clowns, its end is already written. And here we are centuries later, applauding ignorance while crucifying thought. We've built temples of distraction where the altar is the screen and the priests are those who entertain the masses. But Socrates wouldn't despair. He would remind us that every dark age is an invitation to awaken. The same ignorance that blinds the world can provoke the emergence of new thinkers. Those who question, doubt, refuse to be deceived. Wisdom has always been rebellion, a silent revolution that begins in the soul. Ask yourself, do I live according to my own understanding or according to the noise around me? Do I seek truth or just validation? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're the beginning of freedom. Because as long as you're afraid to confront your ignorance, you remain a prisoner. Not of society, but of your own mind. Socrates believed knowledge wasn't something to possess, but something to live. He called it arete, excellence of the soul. To live with arete meant aligning your thoughts, words, and actions with truth, even when inconvenient. In our time, that kind of integrity is revolutionary. It means being willing to stand alone in a world that rewards conformity. It means valuing understanding over approval. The modern world says success is measured by wealth, followers, and fame. But Socrates would ask, if you gain the world but lose your soul, what have you really conquered? The search for wisdom begins when you stop trying to impress others and start seeking self-knowledge. That's where true strength lies, not in how many people agree with you, but in the depth of your understanding of your own mind. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Socrates would agree. Self-knowledge is the path to liberation. When you begin to understand your fears, desires, and illusions, you become immune to manipulation. No propaganda, no influencer, no ideology can enslave a mind that knows itself. That's why the Socratic method is more relevant today than ever. It's the cure for a civilization addicted to appearances. But the question remains, can wisdom survive in a world that rewards ignorance? The answer is yes, but only if people choose to keep the flame alive within themselves. Every time you question instead of reacting, you light that flame. Every time you choose reflection over outrage, silence over noise, truth over convenience, you resist the culture of foolishness. You become, in a way, a modern disciple of Socrates. Remember, he never wanted followers. He wanted thinkers, people capable of facing truth even when it hurts. Because truth doesn't enslave, it liberates. It eliminates illusion and leaves only what is real. And while that may be uncomfortable, it's also the birthplace of wisdom, peace, and authenticity. Perhaps the antidote to our worship of the ignorant isn't anger or cynicism, but awakening. A silent revolution of consciousness, a return to inner dialogue. The same dialogue Socrates began thousands of years ago. The moment you dare to ask, what is truth, you separate yourself from the crowd and step into your own light. And perhaps that's what our society needs most. Not another voice shouting into the void, but millions of silent thinkers awakening from their sleep. Because when enough minds begin to question, the illusion crumbles. Truth, like light, doesn't fight darkness. It simply reveals. May Socrates' words echo once again through the centuries. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. It's not a confession of weakness, but a declaration of freedom. It's the starting point of true intelligence, the humility that opens the door to understanding. If you've made it this far, it means you're not satisfied with the superficial answers of the modern world. You're part of the few who still seek meaning in an age of madness. And for that, Socrates would call you a philosopher. Not someone who loves debates, but someone who loves truth. So before you leave this video, ask yourself one final question. Am I living awake? Or am I still sleeping among the dreamers? The answer to that question could change everything. If this message touched you, share it. Let it reach others who might still be sleeping. Because wisdom doesn't spread by force, but by inspiration. Subscribe to the channel, leave your opinion in the comments, and remember, the journey toward wisdom never ends. It only deepens. Because the true revolution, as Socrates taught, doesn't begin in the streets. It begins in the mind. Thank you for watching.